The Void, Series 1, Episode 4, The Fillim Perspective, by Richard Marcus Powell. Chapter 7. Caliban was such a polluted world that the urban areas were stratified. Those that could afford it lived in the upper layers, whereas the poorest were subjugated to the deprivations of ground level. The air was toxic, and to breathe easily, a respirator was necessary. No one moved around without a mask, not if they wanted to live. Some of the chemicals floating loose in the atmosphere could physically melt the lungs, resulting in horrific bleeding from the mouth and an inevitable painful demise. As a result of this, the ecosystem was practically barren, only a few microbes able to survive the poisonous mists. Even some of the bacteria that decompose organic matter were unable to exist in great numbers, only appearing in patches across the planet. This meant refuse lay in the streets permanently. Not that there was anything approaching breathable air any higher up in those privileged heights. The air was still poisonous. It just couldn't melt your skin upon direct contact. That was passed for clean air on Caliban. Rain fell from the sky. Not natural precipitation, but polluted liquid laced with heavy metals and caustic chemicals. It was even tinged red, as if to alert you to its danger. If the fluid was any thicker, it would be like the sky was bleeding. And it rained a lot in Mennan City. Industrial pollution filled the air with particles that pulled the chemical rain down from the leaded clouds. There was a heavy military presence in the city, but outside they were masked as well, giving their presence an even more sinister appearance. They were authority without identity, and free to exert that authority at their discretion. Thugs with a license and uniform, they frequently brutalized the populace, knowing that they would never be questioned or reprimanded as long as they adhered to Teel's orders. People scurried through the miasma, afraid of the fog and afraid of the military presence. There were a few street traders, but even those stores were set up with airtight cubicles for isolation from the hazardous environment. Shops and bars displayed their presence through the murk with neon signage and elaborate displays, the brightness having to compensate for the sun's lack of penetration into these concrete canyons. Mira Candor had seen the same scene on so many corporate worlds and despised it, but it did afford some advantages. Surveillance at this level was difficult due to the swirling mists, enabling Mira to stalk prey with impunity. The distinctive armor that Mira wore was something that could prove problematic in terms of easy identification, but it was too useful to abandon, and it did have useful stealth features. Mira had the diffuser activated, which acted as a form of camouflage. It projected what was behind her onto the front of the armor, giving a very limited form of invisibility. It didn't work anywhere near as well in a clear environment, but in any kind of low visibility, it made Mira very difficult to detect. The bar opposite could be barely seen by Mira, even with enhanced optical feeds built into the helmet. The officers' club was exactly what the name suggested, a club for ranking members of the military. Not high rank, or it would have been located in the upper levels, but those with some limited authority. Mira checked the media pad he carried, bringing up the profile of their quarry. The image was of an attractive man in his prime wearing a teal uniform. Mira liked hunting beautiful people. They were always so much easier to detect in a crowd. The door of the bar opened. The airlock inside ejected forth 2 occupants. The masks made identification difficult, but one of the pair was a good potential, and so Mira activated the helmet's recognition software. It scanned the individual and mapped facial features, comparing them with the record. It indicated a match with a very narrow margin of error, so Mira started following the pair. After a while, the pair said goodbye to each other and parted. Mira stayed on target, following the remaining individual as he made his way through the streets. It was difficult to maintain the pace through the crowds, but this hindered him as much as it did Mira. Mira wanted to wait until there was a quiet area where they could spring an ambush in, and it took a long time for the individual to oblige Mira. When he did so, Mira shot a small projectile into his back, tranquilizing him. This was a risk, as if he was wearing a substandard suit. The air could penetrate the internal system and introduce a potentially lethal dose of air. The mask looked like it was an all-in-one, but the air could still prove fatal through skin absorption. After a few steps, he started staggering before collapsing to the ground. Mira kneeled beside him and turned him over, removing the projectile and slapping a sealant patch over the hole. He then started checking his prey's pockets and found his official identification. Scanning it, he validated what he suspected.
"Luca Bresson,"
Mira stated. "I know you," the disorientated man slurred.
"The Makeen would like a word with you."
The realization became apparent in those drowsy eyes. "No, you can't," he protested weakly. "Not them."
"Shouldn't have put them off then,"
Mira castigated. Luca passed out from the tranquilizer. This was a problem in itself, for they were now some distance from Mira's vehicle. Dragging a body through the streets would be noticed, so they had to be a little more discreet. Mira summoned a vehicle for a pickup. It was a maglev shuttle with a limited intelligence, so it wouldn't take long for it to locate them. For the next few minutes, Mira just had to ensure that no one happened to come across them. Non-lethal measures would be deployed, but these shouldn't be used unless absolutely necessary. Stealth and, failing that, bluff should take priority. Fortunately, the maglev shuttle arrived within a few minutes, and Mira heaved the unconscious body of Luca Bresson into the rear of the shuttle. Once he got back to the Black Sun, his ship, he would have to restrain Luca. There was a good chance he would take any opportunity to commit when he came around, for he knew what awaited him. Not that Mira cared. As far as he was concerned, Luca deserved everything coming to him. It was going to be rough justice, but justice all the same. All in all, a routine acquisition for Mira, along with a suitable reward upon delivery.